Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and appreciate the opportunity to speak on the Prohibition of Gang Insignia in Government Premises Bill. And so to add my voice to those who say this is a complete waste of our time. This is a bill for the inadequate and frankly the flaccid and the armchair toughies who sit back in the comfort of places like this to talk at length about the horror of the gangs without actually wanting to do anything meaningful about it. This will do nothing. This does nothing. It is cosmetic. It is literally cosmetic. It's about dealing with the outward appearance of a gang member. It does nothing about the underlying issues and realities of gangs. We all know about the reality of gangs, and if there's anybody in this House who knows more than Mr Sabin about gangs, I'd be most surprised, because he has been at the forefront of the war on the drugs that have been peddled and pushed and run by gangs for many, many years. And he knows the insidious effect that many gang members have. He knows, as does Mr Mitchell, that the primary reason that we have gangs and that they behave the way they do is because they are a criminal enterprise. And they are an issue that we ought to take seriously. They are an issue about which we need proper laws and effective enforcement. They are also an issue that we need other effective policies about too, because gangs flourish and come into existence at times of poverty and deprivation and alienation and disillusionment. And we actually need measures about those sorts of things as well to go hand in hand with effective criminal response and criminal enforcement. But this will do nothing. This will do nothing for any of those. Mr Prosser talks about eradicating gangs forever. Well, politicians have been talking like that in this country for the last 40 years about getting rid of gangs and about eliminating them and banging them all up and locking them up and treating them like in horrific sort of ways. That continued, of course, until we had a Prime Minister named Rob Muldoon, who decided as part of his style of political leadership to offer the hand of support and engagement and understanding. And he provided work for gangs to do with state support, and suddenly it made a difference. Some gangs actually went down a path of the straight and narrow, but since then they have become a repository of criminal wrongdoing and criminal enterprises, and they serve no useful purpose by and large. And so when we think about effective remedies to the gang problem and those who would go around intimidating and bullying and acting like thugs and upsetting the citizenry and the good burgers of Wanganui or Lee or any other part of the country, then what would we do? Well, the last thing we would think about doing is taking the jackets off them. That's not going to change anything. As it did in Wanganui when they had their gang patch prohibition, all it did was send the gangs out of the centre of the city. They just turned up somewhere else and carried on their same usual ways. It didn't change the existence or the presence of gangs, and it didn't change their conduct or behaviour. And so what will this do? If this law can be effectively enforced, and there's real doubt whether it can, because of the definitions, because of the vague applications and the vague boundaries that are now defined within it, well, what's it going to do? It'll shift the problem around. It won't address the underlying issue of gangs. And the only thing that the bill, as reported back from the Select Committee, does, the principal change, is to add some government premises, foremost amongst them police stations, because apparently this bill contemplates the real possibility that police at the moment cannot manage their own premises to keep gangs out of it. Well, that's just patently ridiculous. That illustrates how silly this bill has become, that the principal change to it as a result of the Select Committee is to say, oh, police stations must be covered as one of the government premises. Well, that is plainly ridiculous. The other principal addition is the adding of the letters MC after some of the named gangs, because suddenly the sponsor of the bill has discovered that all these gangs that were listed in the original bill are actually motorcycle gangs. So we better add something that stands for motorcycle after it. Or most of them will be motorcycle gangs, some of them won't be. Some of them will be other things. But then there's a catch-all change to the bill that says anything that kind of looks like it's named this way will be covered by it. And of course the other interesting aspect of the bill I note is the power of the police to give chase to somebody wearing a gang patch, a nominated gang patch. But in order to give chase, and before they can pull a gang patch wearing citizen over, the police officer or the constable, him or herself, has to be, and I quote from the bill, be wearing a uniform or distinctive cap, hat or helmet with a badge of authority, which might all be paraphrased into a word, insignia. We need a police insignia on the police officer before they can give chase and stop the citizen who is wearing a gang-patched garment on their person. And so it illustrates again the fruitless nature of this piece of legislation, the fruitless nature of this bill. And it illustrates again a government, whether in their personal capacity as members bringing members' bills, or a government, and actually, if we had a government that was serious about the gang issue, we'd have a minister here bringing legislation that was dealing with the problem. But the mere fact that this is a members' bill being brought on a members' day, an ineffective piece of legislation being brought on for ineffective purposes on an issue that is actually quite important, illustrates how serious or not this government takes this issue and issues associated with it. If this was a government serious about dealing with the gang issue, we would not only have effective and effectively enforceable criminal legislation that would deal with it, but would have a government that was dealing with the underlying social issues that drive people to gangs and to gang activity. And we would have a set of criminal legislation that will deal with gangs embarking on criminal enterprises, the sort of legislation that the Honourable Phil Goff introduced when he was a Minister of Justice, that deals with the power of gangs, the wealth and the assets they accumulate, and starts taking it off them. Not meaningless gestures like this that deals with the clothes that they wear, because that doesn't change their behaviour. It doesn't change them congregating and aggregating as citizens with a criminal motive and a criminal purpose. It'll do nothing about that. It deals with the clothes that they wear. Well, that is not effective at all. And then it requires the police and the minister to be constantly in touch with gang activity and what gangs are around, because this legislation deals with nominated gangs. And if there is a new gang, and they do spring up from time to time, then the minister has to pass an order or seek an order in council to add whatever new gang there is to it. And the minister has to be satisfied that they are a gang, that they're criminal, and they've got all this sorts of stuff. So they have to be satisfied that the information and the evidence is there before they can seek their order in council. So this adds an entire rigmarole to deal with a cosmetic problem rather than the real problem that underpins it. And a government that was serious about criminal activity and the criminal fraternity and criminal enterprise would bring a piece of legislation through a minister who was genuinely concerned about it, would bring a piece of legislation that was directed to dealing with criminal activity and giving the police the means and the powers to deal with them, not just to take their patch off them or chase them because they've got a patch on or arrest them because they wear a gang patch. That will do nothing. And because one of the other badges of honour, if I could use that pun in this context, one of the badges of honour of gang members is to accumulate a criminal record, to cause the police inconvenience, and to cause the police draw themselves to the attention of the police and force them to take them through the courts and do all those sorts of things. So this will do nothing for the gang problem. It will be another feather in their cap if they are caught by it and cause inconvenience and unnecessary waste of resources for the police. It'll be another feather in their cap, and they'll brag about it and talk about it and boast about it, but it won't fix the gang problem, and it won't fix criminal activity, and it won't stop the criminal enterprises that are gangs. And so, sir, that's why we're opposed to this. It is a meaningless gesture that is actually on an issue that ought to be taken seriously and something seriously be done about it. We are opposed to the bill.
I call Jamie Lee Ross.
Mr. Speaker, Andrew Little, Chris Farford.